Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. And our topics for tonight are Trump's plan for fascism and inflation worries. So let us get right into it. I'm going to share the screen. For this piece by Robert Reich, which I picked up in LA Progress. The title is How Donald Plans to Impose Fascism in 5 Steps. This was done on April 2nd, 2024. So I've been holding it for a while. Cartoon, okay, American democracy, with one of the pillars of American democracy collapsing. On Friday, Trump posted a video featuring an image of President Biden hog-tied, with hands and feet bound together. Trump has previously posted doctored photos and videos depicting him physically attacking Biden, such as hitting Mr. Biden with golf balls. It's all part of Trump's 5-step fascist plan. In a previous post, I laid out the defining traits of fascism. We covered that post here. And how MAGA Republicans embody them. And I suggested that Trump and his lackeys shouldn't be seen as simply, quote, authoritarian, unquote. They need to be understood as fascist. But how could Trump actually turn America into a fascist state? In 5 steps, which he's already signaled he plans to take. Here they are. Step 1, use threats of violence to gain power. Hitler and Mussolini relied on their vigilante militias to intimidate voters and local officials. We watched Trump try to do the same in 2020, even before he incited the attack on the U.S. Capitol. He said on national television, quote, "Proud Boys, stand back and stand by," unquote. Now Trump is vilifying his political opponents as, quote, vermin, unquote, who needed to be, quote, rooted out, unquote. He shows an image of Biden hog-tied. After Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg requested a gag order, providing some 300 pages of exhibits documenting the real-world consequences of Trump's attacks, Judge Juan Merchan found the filing persuasive. He said Trump's statements, quote, were threatening, inflammatory, denigrating, and the targets of his statements ranged from local and federal officials, court and court staff, prosecutors and staff assigned to the cases, and private individuals, including grand jurors performing their civic duty, unquote, citing Bragg's filing, and had caused, quote again, the assignment of increased security resources to investigate threats and protect the individuals and family members, unquote, of those Trump targeted. After the gag order was issued, Trump attacked Judge Merchan's daughter for running a political consulting firm that's worked with Democrats, saying it should disqualify Merchan from his case. On Friday night, Bragg asked the judge to, quote, clarify or confirm, unquote, that the order applies to family members and ordered Trump to immediately desist, to, quote, immediately desist from attacks on family members, unquote. Also last week, U.S. District Judge Reggie Walton spoke out in an interview with CNN's Caitlin Collins about Trump possibly instigating violence. Quote, we do these jobs because we're committed to the rule of law, and we believe in the rule of law. And the rule of law can only function effectively when we have judges who are prepared to carry out their duties without the threat of potential physical violence, physical harm, I should say. Meanwhile, Republican election officials have testified to the threats they faced when they refused Trump's demands to falsify the 2020 election results. Brad Raffensperger, the Georgia Secretary of State, who refused Trump's demand to, quote, find, unquote, the votes needed to flip the state into Trump's hands, said, quote, my email, my cell phone was doxxed, unquote. Rusty Bowers, the Arizona state speaker and a pro-Trump Republican, who resisted pressure from Trump and Rudy Giuliani, refused to go along with an illegal scheme to replace Arizona's legal slate of electors, and he remains a target of pro-Trump partisans. As he said, they've had video panel trucks with videos of me proclaiming me to be a pedophile, unquote. Gabriel Sterling, the chief operating officer for the Georgia Secretary of State, who helped to manage the 2020 presidential election and recount in Georgia that found no widespread fraud, has faced death threats. Sterling admonished Trump, Mr. Trump, you have not condemned these actions or this language. Excuse me. This has to stop. Stop inspiring people to commit potential acts of violence. Someone's going to get hurt. Someone's going to get shot. Someone's going to get killed, unquote. Step 2, consolidate power. A would-be fascist turns every arm of government into a tool of his will. One of Hitler's first steps was to take over the civil service, purging it of non-Nazis. In October of 2020, Trump issued his own executive order that would have enabled him to fire tens of thousands of civil servants and replace them, with MAGA loyalists. He never got to act on it, but he's now promising to apply it to the entire civil service if reelected. Trump has urged making every executive branch employee fireable by the President of the United States. Quote, excuse me, dismantle the U.S. government and replace it with Trump's vision, unquote. Step 3, demonize a group of people and establish camps. Hitler used the imaginary threat of, quote, the poison of foreign races, mostly Jews, to justify taking control of the military and police, placing both under his top general and granting law enforcement powers to his civilian militias. Now Trump is using the same language to claim he needs similar powers to deal with immigrants. Trump says they're, quote, poisoning the blood of our country, unquote. Recently, Trump warned the country would face a, quote, bloodbath if he lost the election. He then walked back the claim saying he was referring to losing the auto industry. A few days later, he attacked Jewish Democrats in a radio interview, saying that Jews who vote for Democrats hate their religion, and Israel. At a rally on March 16th, Trump baselessly claimed that other countries were sending gang members and other undesirables to the United States. Quote, I don't know if you call them people, quote unquote, in some cases. They're not people, in my opinion, unquote. He then referred to them as, quote, animals, unquote. Trump plans to deploy troops within the United States to conduct immigration raids and round up what he estimates to be 18 million people who would be placed in mass detention camps while their fate is decided. Even though crime is actually down across the nation, Trump is citing an imaginary crime wave to justify sending troops into blue cities and states against the will of governors and mayors. Quote, you're supposed to not be involved in that. You just have to be asked by the governor or the mayor to come in. The next time, I'm not waiting, unquote. Trump insiders say he plans to invoke the Insurrection Act to have the military crush civilian protests. We saw a glimpse of that in 2020 when Trump deployed the National Guard against peaceful protesters outside the White House. With promises to pardon January 6th criminals and stop prosecutions of right-wing domestic terrorists, Trump would empower groups like the Proud Boys to act as MAGA enforcers. Step 4. Jail the opposition. As Putin and other of the world's dictators do, Trump is now openly threatening to prosecute his opponents. Quote, if I happen to be president and I see somebody who's doing well and beating me very badly, I say, quote, go down and indict them. They'd be out of business, unquote. He's looking to remake the Justice Department into a tool of his personal vendettas. As we completely overhaul the Federal Department of Justice and FBI, we will also launch sweeping civil rights investigations into Marxist local district attorneys. Marxist local district attorneys?
Where did he get that?
Is there even one district attorney in the United States who's a Marxist? In the model of Hitler and Mussolini, Trump describes his opponents as subhuman. Quote, the radical left thugs that lived like vermin within the confines of our country, quote. Who's a radical left thug? I mean, the radical left people I know are anything but thugs. Step 5, undermine the free press. As Hitler well understood, a fascist state needs to control the flow of information. Trump has been attacking the press for years, calling them the enemy of the people. He's threatening to punish news outlets whose coverage he dislikes. On his, quote, Truth Social, unquote, platform, he wrote, quote, our so-called, quote, government, unquote, should come down hard on them and make them pay for their illegal political activity. Much more to come. Watch, unquote. He's helped to reduce trust in the media to such a historic low that his supporters view him as their most trusted source of information. He tells them, quote, I will never lie to you, unquote, although his lies are constant and continuous. Okay, I have to say that I think the politicians and the government have gone a very long way already towards undermining the flow, undermining the free press. It seems like it seems like the administration in office now has tried to control the flow of information, itself. At this point, I need to say also that this article, of course, is intended to focus on Trump because he's seen, as the threat. But certainly when it comes to the flow of information, there's also plenty to go around in terms of democratic attempts to control the flow of information. Trump has not hidden his plans going on with the peace. You've heard him promise to, quote, be a dictator one day, unquote. History shows there are no, quote, one day, unquote, dictators. We must take Trump's five-step fascist plan seriously and do everything in our power to stop it. One thing you can do right now is to share the following video, which my colleagues and I made recently about Trump's planned steps towards a fascist dictatorship. I don't know if I'll play the whole video. If it's short, I might. We'll see. I'll stop it as we go.
You've heard Trump's promise.
I'm going to be a dictator for one day.
History shows there are no one-day dictatorships. When democracies fall, they typically fall completely. In a previous video, I laid out the defining traits of fascism and how MAGA Republicans embody them. But how could Trump, or someone like him, actually turn America into a fascist state? Here's how, in 5 steps. Step number 1, use threats of violence to gain power. Hitler and Mussolini.
So this video is essentially the same as the article, so I don't think I need to go through it. But you have the 5 steps. To review them, the first step is to use violence to intimidate people, during and after the election period. Now, Trump has already used threats of violence while he was the president. And when he was running for office last time, and of course, after he lost, the election, or at least after most people thought that he had lost the election. And evidence shows after he thought he had lost it, because he was trying to get people to change votes and change vote counts. So he must have thought that he lost it. Second, consolidate power. The example cited here is take over the civil service and fill it with people who are loyal to yourself. Take over the government, fill it with people who are personally loyal to you. Step 3, if your core was to demonize a group of people, and to establish a police state to round them up into detention camps. And I think you could see that Trump, would do this. He certainly would do it, with immigrants. But I think he's also capable of doing it with other groups of people that he dislikes. But he'll probably start with the immigrants. He also has stated on a number of occasions, and this is step 4, that he would jail the opposition. And finally, he would undermine, the press. I don't think I'm going to call it the free press, because I don't think it's particularly free now. But he would certainly bias the press towards himself, and what he does. And he would probably take steps to control the alternative media. I'm sure he would do that. He would try to control what was on social media. I think we can count on him for that. So because many people got a comparison of Joe Biden and okay, including Joe Biden, would not take these 5 steps. Most probably the worst they would do is steps. How horrible would it be to live in a country where people were getting rounded up and sent to mass detention camps? I think that would be horrible. And I think people who are politically active now and who would want to remain politically active, if Trump were the president, have something to worry about. They could end up in such a camp if he is elected as president, okay, of the United States. I have no doubt that he would jail the serious opposition in order to keep himself as dictator of the United States. It's free. People cannot live in defiance of the regime. Same is true, okay, in Russia. And they might even say to you, that's not the most serious issue. Russia and China currently seem to be doing very well for their population. Their leaders uh, seem to be popular. Certainly in China and in Russia too, there seems to be considered, which we used to see in China at one time, which we used to see but during Soviet days, okay, in Russia, which we used to see in Nazi Germany or fascist Italy. We see considerable decentralization in Russia and China. And you might think, well, just because an authoritarian takes over doesn't mean there would continue to be there would not continue to be decentralization here in the United States. I think this is probably mistaken with respect to the United States, because I think, given the activism we sometimes see, okay, in this country, more and more people would seek to oppose the administration, okay, a new Trump administration. Then I do think Trump would not hesitate to consolidate his power by crushing the opposition, by jailing millions of people, and by using technology to make his dictatorship a comprehensive and centralized one. I believe he is certainly capable, okay, of doing that. So I think he's certainly a much bigger threat than Joe Biden when it comes to domestic politics. I also believe, of course, as I've said here many times, that the foreign policy of Joe Biden is a terrible threat, okay, to all of us. He has put us, okay, at nuclear risk for the first time, okay, in 40 years. I also have said before, and will say again, I think Trump would make peace with the Russians, okay, in Ukraine, okay, and that would be a good thing, while Biden would most probably try to drag out the struggle, okay, in Ukraine, okay, as long as he can. So I certainly think Trump is likely to be better than Biden, okay, in this respect. Okay, but when it comes to the Middle East, certainly we can't expect a better result from Trump than we currently have, okay, from Biden. When it comes to China, I think all we can expect from Trump is continued attempts to surround China and to cut down on the growth, okay, of China's power, creating for us a continuing risk of nuclear war from that quarter. And we might also get a continuing risk of nuclear war, okay, in the Middle East. Because even though opposing powers do not have nuclear arms now, it seems to me that if Iran and its supporters are defeated in a regional war now, if we have one, they are defeated, okay, in such a regional war, their next move will be to take on a nuclear capability. Because if they do lose, it will probably be because of the nuclear capability of the other side. So that's my commentary on this piece. I think Trump represents nearly as big a threat as Biden does in the foreign policy area. And I think he also represents a far bigger threat of suppressing political activity here in the United States, okay, than Biden does. That's how I compare the two. I think they both, okay, are unacceptable, as I've said here many times. I want to go on to the second piece now. Which is also by Bob Reich. And that's an interesting contrasting piece. It's also from LA Progress. Trump's total eclipse. The cons will end inevitably. This one is from April 8th. And the graphic, I think the graphics for Bob Reich's pieces are all by Bob Reich. This is a graphic, okay, of the world, I guess, in the place it looks like the hair is Donald Trump hair, and the face is replaced by a cartoonish version, okay, of the world, okay, sitting on somebody's body, presumably Donald Trump. But he says, I have this recurring fantasy that Trump will disappear forever. Today's total solar eclipse isn't a perfect analogy because Trump doesn't shine like the sun, and the moon will block the sun only temporarily today. But for a few blissful minutes, anyone who happens to be in the path of today's eclipse will experience an elation more intense than any other celestial experience. Stars will emerge, the universe will be visible, The earth and all life on it will come into sharper focus. The cosmos will feel complete. It's only a matter of time before we experience the same exhilaration when less than convincing, I'm afraid. And he will be gone. Either he'll lose the 2024 election, or he'll be sent to jail, or both. Or he'll win and be president for a short time before becoming so blatantly and dangerously unhinged. Sorry. That even Republican lawmakers demand he step down. I'm sorry, I was interrupted in my stream there. Okay, I lost the feed. Okay, my feed is back. I think it's all right. If someone could confirm that, I would appreciate it. I don't know exactly where I stopped. I'll start from the beginning of the second article. I got Steve Wolfbrand mad, unfortunately. Sorry about that. I have this recurring fantasy Trump will disappear forever. Today's total solar eclipse isn't the perfect analogy because Trump doesn't shine like the sun like the sun, and the moon will block the sun only temporarily today. But for a few blissful minutes, anyone who happens to be in the path of today's eclipse will experience an elation more intense than any other celestial experience. Stars will emerge, the universe will be visible, the earth and all life on it will come into sharper focus. The cosmos will feel complete. It's only a matter of time before we experience the same exhilaration when Trump, is gone. And he will be gone. Either he'll lose the 2024 election, or he'll be sent to jail, or both. Or he'll win and be president for a short time before becoming so blatantly and dangerously unhinged that even Republican lawmakers demand he step down. Eventually, of course, he will depart the celestial realm altogether, as we all will. He'll be 78 in June and doesn't look like he's in the best of shape. But Trump will also go into total eclipse because con artists are able to keep their cons going only if the cons get larger and more audacious. Trump's biggest con, his 2024 presidential campaign, based on his big lie about the 2020 election, is about as big as a con can get. His smaller cons aren't doing well. Anyone who bought into Trump media's initial public offering when it peaked at $79.38 a share is now 43% poorer. After it went public, the Trump media had to report it lost $58.2 million in 2023 on sales of just $4.1 million. This makes Trump media almost worthless. Trump has been selling copies of the King James Bible for $59.99 each. He's calling it the, quote, God bless the USA Bible, unquote, and including the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights, both of which are already in the public domain. and both of which are on the web, of course. Apparently, he's got few buyers. He's been hawking gold chocolate bars, wines, superhero NFTs, and, quote, never surrender, unquote, sneakers for $399 a pair. None of these cons will do any better than Trump University, Trump Steaks, Trump Plaza, Trump Marina, or the Trump Taj Mahal. Like all fraudsters, Trump is running out of suckers. On Saturday night, Trump convinced 117 extraordinarily wealthy people to give him $50 million at a campaign fundraiser at the Palm Beach home of billionaire investor John Paulson. If it's the same John Paulson, he's of Goldman Sachs fame in the dying days of the Bush administration, who worked successfully for a bailout of Goldman Sachs. I wanted here to point out that oh, there it is. If I divide that 50 million by 117, sorry, that didn't work. I get an average of $427,350 per person. Okay, I don't know how people can give an average of $427,000 a piece on the average to anybody, okay, in a fundraiser. That's surely a violation, okay, of campaign financing laws. Just a comment. Anyway, the investors believe, according to Bob Reich, that if Trump becomes president again, he'll give them another big tax cut. But the only way to finance another big tax cut without exploding the federal budget deficit would be to cut Social Security and Medicare, which Trump now promises he won't do. So either Trump's billionaire backers are being conned, or the American people are. So prepare for Trump's total eclipse. I don't find that convincing, okay, for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons why is because Trump could keep both of those promises. He could maintain Social Security, okay, and Medicare, and he could pay, I shouldn't say pay for a big tax cut, but he could provide a big tax cut and still continue to deficit spend if he minted a platinum coin to cover the deficit spending. So Trump can keep both of those promises, and Robert Reich would know that if he paid the slightest bit of attention to certain schools of economics. So Bob says, so prepare for Trump's total eclipse. And he also says, oh, if you're planning to watch the eclipse today, please be sure to wear protective glasses, unlike Trump did in 2017. And then he includes a picture of Trump staring at the sun in 2017 with Melania close by. These days, okay, she's never close by. Uh, I have to say that I don't agree with this. I think that Trump continues to con and continues to have the support of a very large proportion of the public. In fact, continues to lead Joe Biden at this moment, okay, in the polls. Uh, and rightfully so, because Joe Biden's been a terrible president. So, but I thought this article was interesting when contrasted with the earlier one about the steps to fascism. So Bob Reich is terribly afraid that Trump is going to win and turn to fascism, but he also thinks that Trump is going to go into clips very, very soon because people will get wise to his cons. I don't know. He's been pulling these cons for lots and lots of years now, long before he became president. But since he became president, he's been pulling cons. And still, he retains an uncomfortably large base of support. I don't think we can ever forget that. The third thing I wanted to talk about here tonight was March inflation. Was it cause, okay, for worry? And I want to tie the Trump situation together with the inflation threat, whether there is cause, okay, for worry. Because, of course, if we start to have serious inflation again, and that runs over the summer, that, of course, is going to be blamed on Joe Biden. Part of the reason for it will probably be Biden's wars and the interruption of supply chains. Uh, Biden will be blamed for that, and it will be much easier for Trump to actually win and become the president. But do we have cause for worry? This question is addressed by Dean Baker in Counterpunch on April 11th, 2024. That was yesterday. The inflation hawks took March's CPI as cause for celebration. Inflation may not be dead yet. There is no doubt that it was a disappointing report for those hoping we could put the pandemic inflation behind us. But there still is not much basis for thinking the Fed needs to get out the nukes and start shooting big time. The key point to remember is that this inflation continues to be driven overwhelmingly by rent. We know that rental inflation will be falling because we have data on marketed units, the ones that change hands, that show sharply lower rental inflation, and in some cases, such as the BLS index for new tenants, actually deflation. The CPI rental indexes will follow the index for new tenants, but with a lag. That lag is proving longer than had generally been expected, but there is no reason to question the basic logic. If people who change apartments are seeing lower rental inflation, it is pretty hard to tell a story where this doesn't eventually show up in lower rental inflation for people who stay in the same unit. Well, that hasn't been the case in our unit. But anyway, if we just look at the inflation rate excluding shelter, we have been skating close to or even under the Fed's 2.0% target for most of 2023. The figure below shows annualized rates over the prior 3 months from 2019. So generally speaking, there's been a trend for inflation to go down. That's from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and authors' calculations on the CPI. There definitely has been some acceleration in this measure in the last few months, but hardly an extraordinary one. That's perfectly explainable by cyclic moves, as you see from the picture on the graphic. We saw even larger upticks in inflation by this measure in the past, for example, twice in 2019. Rent is typically a stabilizing factor in the overall inflation rate, precisely because the rent of rental inflation changes slowly. There's another item that's played a big role in pushing inflation higher in recent years, and that is auto insurance. Tell me about our auto insurance over the last couple of years has increased from $80 a month to $120 a month. It's ridiculous. The story is that premiums have risen sharply in recent years because of higher payouts and claims. Profits have risen some as well, but we know payouts are most of the story from comparing the CPI measure, which picks up gross payments, with the measure in the PCE deflator. Not certain what the PCE deflator is, forgive me, which pulls out claims. Some of the story with premiums is higher costs due to higher prices for auto repairs, but much of it is simply more claims. Auto theft shot up in the pandemic, but is now coming down. While long term, people are seeing more damage due to climate related events such as floods and hurricanes. That will be an ongoing problem. To be clear, higher auto insurance premiums are a big deal in the sense that people have to bear these costs out of their pockets. However, it is not a part of a conventional inflation picture. The Fed will not be lowering auto insurance premiums by raising interest rates. The solution to climate related damage is to try to limit climate change. But if that is off the agenda for political reasons, then people will just have to get used to higher priced auto insurance, among other things. Anyhow, if we pull auto insurance out of the story, in addition to rent, inflation was well below the Fed's target for most of 2023 and actually negative at several points. We still get the acceleration in recent months to a 2.9% annualized rate as of March, but this hardly seems like worth getting terribly excited over given the past behavior of this index. In short, there is still plenty of reason for believing that the pandemic inflation is behind us. For now, the March report gave the inflation hawk some fresh meat, but a more careful look suggests it doesn't change the basic picture of inflation being largely under control. Yes, I think that's true. And I think something that Dean Baker doesn't take into account is the research work of the MMTers, who, looking at the Fed's rises in interest rates, are now seeing that there's a secular trend for the rise in interest rates, okay, to create a rise in the amount of interest the Treasury Department is paying. And what this means is something like this. Okay, let's say that the deficit spending for this year is on its way to 1.7 or 1.8 trillion dollars. But also we note that interest rate payout or interest payouts by the Treasury Department are projected to amount to $1.2 trillion this year, which means that 2/3 of the deficit is due to the Fed's rise in interest rates. And as the interest payouts have risen, the economy continues to be stimulated. Now, many people would think that should not be the case because most of the interest payouts, okay, are going to wealthy people who have money and whose marginal rates of savings are very high. So, in other words, they're not spending the 1.2 trillion in interest payments. Okay, by the way, uh, okay, before the Fed went on its binge, okay, of raising interest rates, we used to pay out something like 440 billion a year, okay, in interest payouts. So the interest payouts have nearly tripled at this point due to the Fed's raising interest rates. Now, that's roughly $800 billion in terms of an increase, okay, in the deficit. $880 billion in additional deficit spending is a fair amount of stimulus to the economy and is certainly a reason why the economy has continued to look strong and unemployment has continued to remain under 4%. Okay, very low. Dean Baker doesn't point to this, but that certainly suggests that the Fed's attempts to continually raise interest rates and to keep interest rates high have the potential to continue to stimulate, okay, the economy and keep it strong, but also in addition, okay, to be a continuing source of inflation. So the Fed's raising of interest rates is counterproductive in terms of, okay, its end goals. And so whether inflation is largely under control or not, the Fed's remedy is likely to be a force in favor of continuing inflation rather than a force for bringing inflation under control. So in looking at Dean's article, you have to keep that, okay, in mind, that these rises in interest rates at the Fed are causing increased deficit spending on the part, okay, of Treasury, and in general is responsible for 2/3 of the deficit spending we have now. If you think deficit spending is responsible for inflation, then that's something you really have to keep in mind. So that ends that. I want to look at your comments. Oh, Steve Wolfbrand accuses me, or Bob Reich anyway, of Trump derangement syndrome. I don't think Steve gives proper credit to the tendencies towards fascism that Trump has vocalized. Steve, superdelegates and rigging primaries isn't the same thing as telling people, I'm going to be dictator for a day. It's not the same thing as encouraging your supporters to use violence. It's rigging in a different way. I have characterized here streams in the past. Okay, I have characterized the Biden administration as performing inverted totalitarianism, being a part of a movement towards inverted totalitarianism. He says pretty much everything this guy is describing is exactly what the Democrats are currently doing. No, it's not. Okay, the Democrats are not encouraging violence on the part of their supporters. They're not talking to Proud Boys or to comparable movements, okay, on the left. They are not jailing their opposition. When exactly did Trump threaten people with violence? What was the remark to the Proud Boys, if not threatening people with violence? What happened in Portland when Trump was president and suddenly cars appeared pulling people off the streets whose people were unidentified? What was that? Aren't the Democrats trying to jail Trump as we speak? Yeah, they're trying to jail Trump for crimes that Trump committed. And by the way, it's not the Democrats who are trying to do that. It's prosecutors across the country. Now, those prosecutors happen to be Democrats, but they are indicting him and prosecuting him for legitimate violations of law. Yes, they are trying to jail him because he has committed crimes, including trying to overturn, the last election using illegitimate means. There's really no question that he did that. Then Steve says, this is garbage. Okay, I'm out of here. When exactly did Trump threaten people with violence? When doesn't he implicitly threaten people with violence? What were those cartoons about where Biden is hogtied and Trump is hitting him with golf balls? What is that about? That's a dog whistle for violence, Steve. Why do you think it's not? Andy Candy says, hi, Joe. Stopping in, my in-laws took all the kids on an outing till 9 p.m. Woo, what a small blessing. Kay says, hi, Andy. Andy says, hi, Kay. Joe, Aldi prices are in fact skyrocketing. We're going to start a garden. I shop at Aldi too. I don't buy a lot, at Aldi. I usually buy some fish there, of various kinds. I go to Aldi, or I go to Lidl for that. I still find the fish prices to be very reasonable. I also find, I noticed that there was a rise in the price of coffee, but it's not a catastrophic rise, in the rise of coffee. It's not like 30% or something like that. Generally, I don't do a lot of shopping, at Aldi. I do my shopping at Costco and at Trader Joe's. I have found considerable increase in grocery prices. I'm sure I'm paying 30 to 35% more now per week than I was before the inflation started. But right now, I don't find the prices are skyrocketing. I did find what was it, a high price in? Something really jumped last week. It was, I'm trying to think of what it was. One food price must have jumped like 30%, last week. Oh, yeah, I know what it was. It was the price of olive oil. It must have jumped at Costco from $14.99 to $21.99. That's a 50% rise in 1 week. I don't know what caused that, but it's got to be a supply chain problem. I don't think it's price gouging on Costco's part. I've never known Costco to price gouge. Okay, says an organic garden is very good. Yes, it is. And he says, don't understand how corporations and industries can just pass on any cost due to company-related issues onto the public. It's also because of neoliberalism. Yes, it is. It's because of the fact that the government is not properly regulating the industries. It's because the government is not hassling the corporations when they price gouge. And that is because of neoliberalism. And he says, I bought coconut oil because olive oil is inflated. Uh, yeah, I hadn't noticed any rise in the coconut oil, but I wasn't looking at coconut oil. I was looking for olive oil. And uh, okay, we use both coconut oil, okay, and olive oil. But yeah, so okay, but I think that's hopefully a one-time increase in olive oil. Hopefully it'll come back down. It must have been due to some kind of supply chain problem. Anyway, on that note, I think we're done for tonight. I believe Dee is having a show tonight. She said she would have one. So I'm going to hightail it over there. Uh, Hopefully, I'll see some of you over there. It should be a good show tonight. I'm going to end this stream now. Thank you for coming.